It turned out she had also heard from a friend that Emmanuel had been spotted multiple times at a hotel lobby, being hugged by another man. Apparently, this wasn't just a one-time thing. It happened more than 3 times. When confronted, during his tantrum, Emmanuel tried to shift the blame, claiming it wasn't entirely his fault. According to him, everything had been a mutual agreement. They were doing those despicable things for money. Hi there, and welcome to our channel. Today, we're diving into another chilling real-life story. This time, the events unfolded in Baguio City, Philippines. Let's be honest, married life isn't easy, especially when it starts young. It gets even harder when there's no stable income and everything is built on love and spontaneity. And when a baby enters the picture, the challenges multiply, making an already tough situation even more complicated. This case is a prime example of that. So, what really happened? What's the full story behind this one? Stick around as we unpack the details and explore it in more depth. Before we dive in, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and share this story with your friends. Now, let's jump into it. This is the story of Emmanuel, a man born in 1994 in Baguio City, Philippines. Emmanuel grew up in a well-off family and had a deep love for sports. He dreamed of becoming a soccer player, but despite his passion, his skills just weren't strong enough to compete with the many talented players out there. When his dream of becoming an athlete fell through, it hit him hard. After finishing school, Emmanuel had no interest in pursuing college. Instead, he found work as a security guard at a gold shop in the Ambiong area. In 2015, Emmanuel reconnected with Marisol, a former school senior who was now working as a finance staff member at a hotel. The two hit it off, quickly grew close, and eventually started dating. However, their relationship wasn't smooth sailing. Marisol's father, Mr. Vicente, disapproved of Emmanuel. He saw him as someone with little financial stability, a small monthly salary, and a lack of ambition. Mr. Vicente had always envisioned a wealthier, older, and more reliable man for his daughter. So, for almost 2 years, Emmanuel and Marisol kept their relationship a secret. Everything changed in May 2017. The couple decided to face Mr. Vicente and tell him they wanted to get married, even though they didn't have much savings. As expected, their request was met with anger and rejection. But then Marisol revealed a truth that shocked everyone. She was pregnant. Mr. Vicente was devastated. He expressed his deep disappointment but eventually gave his reluctant blessing for Marisol and Emmanuel to marry. A month later, the couple had a simple wedding. Emmanuel was 23, and Marisol was 25. On the surface, their life seemed comfortable, but in reality, Marisol carried much of the financial burden. The couple rented a house to avoid relying on their parents, but things were tough. As her pregnancy progressed, Marisol went on maternity leave. This meant Emmanuel had to take on extra work. In addition to his job as a security guard, he started driving an online taxi to make ends meet. Marisol's salary continued to help, though it was reduced due to her leave. In December 2017, they welcomed their son. When the baby was 3 months old, Marisol's parents stepped in to help, taking care of the child so Marisol could return to work. However, the relationship between Emmanuel and his father-in-law remained tense. Mr. Vicente still saw Emmanuel as someone who relied too much on Marisol and didn't measure up to his expectations. Let's fast forward to mid-2020, right in the middle of the pandemic. The office where Emmanuel worked had to shut down due to restrictions, and things quickly spiraled downhill. Over 60% of the staff, including security, were laid off indefinitely, leaving Emmanuel without a steady income. For Emmanuel, this was devastating. His 1.5-year-old son needed formula, diapers, and all the necessities that come with parenting. With no other options, Emmanuel was left relying solely on his online taxi gig. But even that wasn't enough. His car was still on loan, so part of his earnings went straight to installments. To make matters worse, Marisol's hotel shut down too, leaving her unemployed. The little savings they had didn't last long, and rent payments kept coming, even though they received a small amount of relief. To top it off, Marisol's parents were relentless, nagging her daily about her choice of husband. "Love isn't everything," they'd say. "Money is what matters." Meanwhile, Emmanuel's income plummeted. Hardly anyone was booking rides since most people were staying home as advised by the government. By May 2020, things got so bad they had to borrow money from Marisol's younger brother, Gregorio, to cover overdue electricity and water bills. Gregorio, a 24-year-old civil servant at the Ministry of Social Affairs, had a steady salary that wasn't impacted by the pandemic. He often stepped in to help his sister financially and kept it all a secret from their father, who was known for his temper. By July 2020, things started looking up, just a little. Businesses were gradually reopening, and Emmanuel noticed more passengers requesting rides again. That's when he picked up a passenger named Thomas, a 49-year-old businessman dealing in clothing and alcohol. Thomas was friendly and seemed to like Emmanuel's service. He asked for Emmanuel's number, explaining that he didn't want to keep booking rides through the app. Instead, he wanted to call Emmanuel directly whenever he needed a driver. For Emmanuel, this was a blessing. Money was tight, and the idea of a steady client was a lifesaver. Thomas wasn't just generous with his tips. He also paid for meals and even gave Emmanuel more than fair wages. Soon, Emmanuel became Thomas's go-to driver. He drove him to client meetings, bars, hotels, and even on long trips like to Santiago City to collect debts from a customer. The arrangement seemed ideal. Thomas was easygoing and never stingy with his money, which made life a little easier for Emmanuel. But there was a catch, one that Emmanuel hadn't anticipated. Occasionally, Thomas would request Emmanuel's company at night, not just as a driver but as someone to keep him company when he felt lonely. At first, Emmanuel was shocked. But desperate times call for desperate measures, and for the sake of money, he agreed. Marisol believed her husband was simply working hard, driving his taxi day and night. She didn't think much of the times he didn't come home, assuming he was taking passengers on long trips out of town, sleeping in his car, or resting at the airport while waiting for early morning pickups. The money was coming in, and Emmanuel regularly transferred funds to her. That was enough to keep her from questioning his long absences. What Marisol didn't know was that Emmanuel wasn't just driving passengers. He was being used by one particular client, Thomas. Their arrangement had crossed a line, and Emmanuel was now engaging in intimate acts with the older man in exchange for money. In early September 2020, Thomas rented an apartment to self-quarantine for a few weeks. Emmanuel stayed there with him, taking care of his meals and medicines. Weeks passed without Emmanuel returning home, and when Marisol asked, he told her he was on an extended out-of-town booking. Thomas used the same excuse, telling his family in Kawayan City that he was away on business. Despite his absence, Emmanuel kept sending money to Marisol every couple of days, and they stayed connected through frequent video calls. Everything seemed normal until September 15, 2020. That day, Julio, one of Marisol's co-workers, pulled her aside and dropped a bombshell. He had seen Emmanuel multiple times in their apartment building, often in the company of an older man. At first, Marisol brushed it off, thinking Julio must be mistaken. But then Julio sent her a photo of Emmanuel near the elevator with Thomas. Furious, Marisol immediately called Emmanuel to confront him. He denied everything, claiming he had only been at the apartment to help a sick passenger. Marisol wasn't buying it. She demanded he come home right away, especially since Julio claimed Emmanuel had been staying there for weeks. When Emmanuel returned home, things escalated. Marisol's younger brother, Gregorio, was there, and he was furious. Gregorio had also heard rumors about Emmanuel being seen in compromising situations, including being embraced by another man in a hotel lobby, on more than one occasion. Despite Emmanuel's denials, Gregorio wasn't having it. He kicked Emmanuel out of the house and threatened to report everything to their father. Feeling trapped, Emmanuel returned to Thomas's apartment on the evening of September 20, 2020, throwing a fit. But Thomas wasn't sympathetic. He reminded Emmanuel that their arrangement was consensual. "If you didn't want this, you should have said so from the start," Thomas argued. I could have found someone else. Thomas also pointed out that Emmanuel had been well compensated for his services. You're not doing this for free, he said. There are risks, sure, but I'm taking them too. If my wife and kids found out, I'd be in trouble too. So just accept the deal for what it is. Emmanuel's anger hit its peak. In a fit of rage, he grabbed a chair and threw it to the ground before lunging at Thomas with a knife he had snatched from the apartment kitchen. A piercing scream echoed through the 5th floor, catching the attention of the residents. They rushed toward the noise and found Thomas bleeding. Without hesitation, they called for help, and Thomas was taken to the hospital in critical condition. Meanwhile, Emmanuel was taken into custody by the authorities. Fortunately, Thomas survived, though it took 5 days of intensive care for him to pull through. The incident, however, sent shockwaves through their community, and delivered a harsh blow to Emmanuel's father-in-law, Mr. Vicente. 4 years, Mr. Vicente had warned his daughter against marrying Emmanuel. He had opposed their relationship from the start, and now this? To him, it was the ultimate, "I told you so." Disgusted and furious, Mr. Vicente refused to visit Emmanuel in detention. Only Marisol and her brother, Gregorio, stood by Emmanuel, supporting him as they waited for his trial. Because of pandemic-related delays, the court proceedings didn't start until over a year later. During that time, Emmanuel repeatedly apologized to Marisol, insisting he had only taken such extreme measures to provide for her and their child. He explained that the job as an online taxi driver wasn't enough, and he felt trapped. Becoming an entertainer for Thomas, as humiliating as it was, had been his way of keeping their family afloat. When the trial finally began, Thomas testified, claiming he was entirely innocent. According to him, nothing illegal had occurred. He explained that he and Emmanuel had a clear agreement from the start. "I told him," Thomas said in court, "this is how much I'll pay you. If you're okay with it, great. If not, feel free to leave. But if you agree, you have to follow all my wishes." Emmanuel agreed. "In fact, I even paid him more than what we originally discussed." He knew what he was getting into, and he knew the risks. If his family found out, that was on him, not me. So why the sudden rage? Emmanuel's lawyer argued that his client's actions were fueled by a moment of blind rage. He thought he had been careful, the lawyer explained. But when his wife and brother-in-law discovered what was going on, he panicked. Emmanuel had stopped at a bar, drank heavily, and then went to Thomas's apartment. What happened next was not premeditated, it was the result of impaired judgment caused by alcohol. The lawyer requested leniency, suggesting that Emmanuel should be acquitted of the charges or, at the very least, sentenced to mandatory reporting rather than incarceration. Thomas flat out denied Emmanuel's claims. He insisted that Emmanuel arrived that night in perfect condition. He wasn't stumbling, his speech wasn't slurred, and there was no smell of alcohol on his breath. "He's just immature, unprofessional, and only cares about getting money," Thomas said in court. "But when he gets caught, he cries like a kid. What he did was cruel, and I won't forgive him. I almost lost my life because of him. He deserves the harshest punishment possible." Thomas's statement was backed by testimonies from apartment neighbors, who said Emmanuel didn't show any signs of being drunk that night. Even the authorities confirmed it. Emmanuel, fully aware of his actions, admitted in court that he attacked Thomas out of rage. "I wanted to end him," he said, "because he ruined my marriage and humiliated me." On October 24, 2021, the Baguio City High Court reached a verdict. The judge declared Emmanuel, now 25, guilty of assault and attempted murder. He was sentenced to 15 years in prison, with eligibility for bail after serving at least 8 years. The time he spent in custody while waiting for his trial was deducted from his sentence. Marisol, who had forgiven her husband, wanted to file an appeal, arguing that Thomas appeared to be in good health. However, her father and brother disagreed. "Let Emmanuel serve his time," they told her. "He needs to reflect on his actions. Stop spoiling him." They even urged Marisol to file for divorce, but she refused. Instead, She moved back into her father's house with her 2-year-old son, determined to hold her family together despite everything that had happened. What lessons can we learn from this story?